Hello, everyone. Good morning. Maybe not such a good morning after all, but so we had the group meeting this morning with all the TAs, and we watched the first speech by Trump. So it was interesting. Okay, but maybe we'll talk about something slightly more exciting today. So. This is going to be a preparation for your last assignment. So you're almost done. You've done assignment 5. Peer review is running now. And so the last assignment is going to be handed out on Sunday. And what I want to teach you there in the last assignment is basically how to really unleash the power of Python. So in particular, I want to show you how to make graphical user interfaces. And there are many ways how you can create graphical user interfaces with Python. You can create traditional desktop software or desktop graphical user interfaces. There's, for example, a library called Qt that you can use if you want to do that. But instead, I thought it might be fun to do some web programming as an alternative graphical user interface. So today, I will show you how we can make a website, but not just a static website, but actually an interactive website. So we will have a Python server sitting on the back end, and it will respond to our requests that we will make through the web page. And so in particular, I will show you, we will actually code up a little game. But before we can do that, I will have to teach you some kind of the basics of web programming first. But just coming back to the assignment, so the assignment 6 is going to be a combination of web programming, but also I want to use one of the libraries that we have in Python. And so one example could be that we do a little bit of machine learning. So you don't actually have to understand all the concepts of machine learning, but you can see that even without knowing all of the details, you can actually do really cool stuff with machine learning. So that's one of the ideas. We haven't fully finalized it yet. If you have any suggestions, or if you want to see something specific, then feel free to just post it on Piazza. Another item that I want to cover is documentation. So there's something called Sphinx, that you can use to automatically generate documentation for your software package. So you run Sphinx, and from your source code, it automatically generates a web page that contains all the documentation for your software project. And then it extracts all the doc strings that you write in your Python code, and it converts it into a web page, and you can click through it and publish it online and so on. Yeah, so these are the 3 components, kind of documentation with Sphinx, graphical user interface, and maybe some cool other library that we could attach. But as I said, if you have any ideas, please feel free to bring them up on Piazza. Okay. Any questions regarding assignment? No? Good. So then let's start with web programming. And so basically, the first thing we need to understand is how does the web actually work? And one of the most fundamental concepts that we have in the web is the hypertext transfer protocol. So basically, whenever we're trying to retrieve a web page, or if we send information from our browser to a server in the internet, we do that typically using the hypertext transfer protocol, or HTTP. So this is a protocol that is designed to enable the communication between clients and servers. And so the clients are typically our web browsers. So the web browser is a client. There are alternative clients, but this is the one that we use the most. And the web server is something that sits somewhere distributed in the world. So Google has web servers all over the place, but you can also run a web server on your local machine. And so basically, what's going on now is that the client makes requests to the server. So for example, it says, I would like to, please give me that web page. And this request is that sent to the server finds the relevant information and sends it back to the client, and then the client visualizes it. And there are two important, or the most common request methods that we use in HTTP. One is called GET, and the other one is called POST. And so the client sends a GET request when it wants to get some data from the server. So for example, if you open up the Google web page, you actually send a GET request to google.com asking it to send you back the information of that web page. The second type of request is a POST request. And the POST request is used whenever you submit data from your client to be processed on the server. So for example, if you want to send some money to your online banking account, and you type in the amount of money that you want to send, as soon as you click the submit button, that sends a POST request to the server. So this is a different type of requests, and we need to differentiate the two. So I just want to show you how this, a simple example. So if I go to HTTP : so this HTTP, the first HTTP here, it's hard to see, but this tells me that I want to use the hypertext transfer protocol, right? And then I can ask to visit the page example.com, for example. And this now just sent a GET request, and I got back the information in a specific format, and my browser actually renders this. So I get a very nice format in here. But I can also look at the raw data. If I right-click on here and click on View Page Source, I can see what the server actually sent me. And you can see that it's actually some kind of text. And the text format is called HTML. And this describes, it's quite lengthy here, but it basically describes what should be visualized on that web page. And this is what our browser actually visualizes. So rather than making this request on the web browser, I can even do this on the command line interface. And there's a command called curl that allows me to do GET requests. So alternatively, I could have typed in curl -vi, so the mean stands for verbose, and then the URL that I want to visit. And if I do that, I get, again, all this source code that we've seen already in the web browser. So it's this HTML source code here. But because I switched on verbose, it's quite interesting to see what was going on at the beginning. So basically, whenever you have a colon that points to the right, this was stuff that was sent from my client, from my computer, to the server. And then everything that points to the left was received from the server. And so basically what you can see, so after I made the request here, you can see I was connecting to example. So first thing what happened is I connected to example.com. It's a specific IP address. And then you can see that I've sent a GET request. I sent a GET request to the position /, so this is the URL /, and the protocol that I want to use is HTTP1 version 1.1. The host is example.com, and I tell the server a little bit about which user agent I use. So if you use Google, you would see Google here. Google Chrome, you would see Google Chrome here, or Firefox. And then this is what the server sends back, right? So this now sends back, it tells me some information. Okay, the request was successful. It tells me all kind of information, how old the web page is. And then finally, it starts sending the actual content, right? It tells me how long the content is, and then it goes ahead and sends the content. Okay, so basically, our goal is to write a server that handles these things, right? The Python server needs to be sitting there and waiting until the GET request comes in, and then when it comes in, we need to handle it and send back the information that the user is looking for. Okay, but to start with, I would like to show you a little bit on how this document format looks like, this HTML. So HTML is the format that is used to render the web pages. And so HTML is a very standard markup language to create web pages. And basically, you find it all over the world, all over the World Wide Web. So if you open up a web page, chances are very high that what you're looking at is an HTML page. And so the reason why we need to learn at least some basics of this is because we will have to write some HTML, because this is how we design our graphical user interface. So the simplest HTML file that we can imagine looks like this. So you can see it contains a lot of it contains some header information here. So we're just telling it that it's an HTML file that we have, and then you always have these tags. So tags are always these items that start with a bracket and then close the bracket, and they have a tag name inside here. And then all these tags are closed again. So if you look here, we have an HTML tag that is opening, that starts. And then here at the last line, we have another tag that has a slash inside, and that indicates that the tag is closed. And so basically, everything in between here is part of the HTML tag, which in this case, it's the HTML document itself. And then we can see we have another tag here that specifies the tag name is head. So this just specifies some header information about the web page. And part of the head is the title. So the title is the thing that is shown on the top of your web browser. And the title in this case is just, this is a title. And again, you can see I use a tag opening and a tag closed at the end. And then the most important part here of our HTML document is this body tag. So this is the part that is actually being visualized on the main frame in our web browser. And in this case, we print the words hello world. Okay, so this we can save this file, for example, as index.html or helloworld.html, and then I can open it up. I have it here with Firefox, for example. And you can see the content. So it's not too exciting, but you can see that the title, this is a title, is actually shown up here. So this was the title tag that I added. Okay, so let's do a quick run through different parts of HTML tags that we can use. So if you want to have comments, the way you do it is with these bracket, exclamation mark, minus, minus, and then everything after that is comment until you have, again, minus, minus, closed bracket. It's not too difficult. You can use the h1 tag and the h2 tag to define headers. So this is going to be large text. h2 is going to be this second subheader, so it's slightly smaller text. We can have new lines actually need to be marked specifically. So if you have in your HTML file and you just write hello world, and then in the next line, this is on the next line, it renders on the same line. So if you really want to have a new line, you need to use this BR tag, which introduces a break, a line break, and then it actually renders as on a separate line. If you want to have special characters in our HTML page, we need to mark them. So we can't have special characters in our HTML files. Instead, for example, if you want to use the Norwegian letters, this is the text that we have to type into the HTML file. So it's a simple replacing structure that we need to use here. So down here, I have an example. It looks very cryptic, but if I render it as HTML, what you see is that the string actually is Os Sir Trøndelag. Then we have paragraphs. So paragraphs are text that is kind of indented a little bit. You use that with a p tag. So again, everything that is between the starting and the closing p tag is part of that paragraph. We can mark texts. We can make text bold. We can make text italic with the I tag. The B tag is used to make text bold. And we can emphasize text using the EM tag. And so finally, we can add links. So with the A tag, you create a new link, and you have to also close the A tag. And you specify, with this href argument, you specify where this link should be pointing to. So you can see down here, this text, this is a link is underlined, indicating that it's indeed a link. And if you look very closely on the bottom left, you can see that this link points to github.com. Right? So this is how you specify links. What else can we do in HTML documents? We can add tables. So tables are a bit more lengthy, but basically we have a table tag, and then a closing table tag, and then a tr tag to mark new lines, and then a th tag to mark header rows, and a td tag to mark normal rows. And so basically I have one line here with the headers, another line here with some information, and then another line with some information. Then we can add images. So image, you introduce an image with the img tag, and you need to use this source attribute. So this is a tag that actually takes an attribute. So we can add additional information to the tag. In particular, we provide the file name of the image here. We also have this alt attribute here that is used to specify an alternative text in case that the image is not available. So if I misspelled the image name here and I would recompile this, instead I won't see the image, but instead I will see the alternative text. Okay, and then you might want to make your user interface a bit more interesting by styling it up. And so every tag can be extended with the style attribute. And the style attribute is basically just a string that you provide. And you can specify various types of styles that you want to, how you want to design your tag. For example, you might want to change the width of your tag, the height, the color or the background color, the font size, and the font family, and so on. So to give you a simple example, we have this image here was quite large, so I added the style attribute down here. Oops. The style attribute down here, and I've specified that the width of the image should only be 100 pixels. Now if I show this, then you can see that the image is scaled up to exactly 100 pixels. And then we can make text more colorful. So here I have a paragraph, and everything that is part of the paragraph will have the text color blue and the background color that is kind of purple. OK, and so a final remark. So this was kind of a very quick introduction to HTML. So just as a remark, so web browsers are not very strict when it comes to HTML. So they're very good at handling mistakes that the user might have made. So I have an example down here where I start an italic text tag, but I actually never end it. Or I start a bold text, but I never close the bold text. So this is invalid HTML, but browsers are actually very generous to us, and they still render quite nicely. But nevertheless, you should there's a service called Validator, w3.org, where you can copy and paste your HTML document, and it will check if it's correct HTML or not. And so if I did this for this code, it will tell me you're missing some closed marks here. Okay, that's everything I wanted to tell you about how we can. So these are kind of the elements that we can use to create our user interface. Any questions? No? Okay, so before we can start building our server, so what I've shown you so far allowed us to visualize or to design a web page, right, on the user. But we also want to be able to send information from the client server, from the client to the server. So we need to have some kind of, we need to be able to allow inputs, we need to have buttons and things like that. And in HTML, the way you do that is with so-called forms. And forms are basically any type of input objects that collect information from the user and that is then sent to the server. And so in HTML, the way we create forms is with a form tag, and then inside the form tag, we can add some form elements, and then we can close the form again. And so which forms do we have? We can have text input, we can have checkboxes, we can have radio buttons, and submit buttons. So here's a simple example. So here we have a form, and we only have one item in the form, and the form is an input text box that takes the first name. So I used the name attribute here, and it's of type password. And because it's of type, the password type makes it such that if I type text in here, it's marked down, so I don't see what I'm typing. So this is classical password text. So if I change this to text here, the type, and I would type in here, then I would actually see what I'm typing. So with these kind of attributes, you can change the behavior of the input arguments. So you can also have multiple inputs as part of your form. So here I have the first name, the last name, and a password. And you can see the type for the first two inputs is text, and the type for the last one is a password. And so now I can kind of type in my information in here. Okay, then we can have radio buttons. So they work exactly the same. They're also an input that have a name, and in this case they also take a value, and we set the type to radio. And what that does is it makes a list of all the inputs that we provided, and I can select only one of them. Okay? So this will be important for our game that we develop later on. And so finally, the last thing that we need is a submit button. So we need to have a button that we click on, and then all the information that is contained in the form is then sent over to the server. And the way you create the submit button is with an input of type submit. And then the value will be the text that is shown in the submit button. And furthermore, somewhere I need to specify what should happen once I click the submit button. And this I describe here in the action part up here. So here I say, once I click the submit button, I want to make a GET request. So this way I have the method equals GET here to the URL http www.bing.com/search. And all the information of that input box will be passed on to that website. So in other words, if I search for election, if I type in election here and I click submit, it will now make a GET request to bing.com/search with the Q variable will be set to the text election. And if I do that, you can see, let's look at the URL up here. So it's difficult to read, but this says www.bing.com/search Q equals election. So this Q equals election is exactly the input parameter that we had in our form. And then we see the results of that GET request. Okay, that's HTML, some kind of the most important tags, and forms. Any questions? Is it clear? Kind of? Maybe? Okay. I hope I show you a lot more examples now, so I hope it becomes clear. Okay, so now, so far, we kind of, what we did, what we can do now is we can write an HTML web page in an editor, right? We can save the file as an HTML file and then open it up in a browser. But that's not very exciting because it's very static, right? So we can't really what we want to do is we want to generate these HTML files dynamically and maybe show some statistics or show the results of a computation or something like that. So rather than just writing all these HTML files by hand, we would like to have a server that generates them for us. Right? And this is what's typically called a web server. And so obviously there's loads and loads of different web servers out there with various different ambitions and use cases. I chose a web server called Flask to show to you. It's a very, very small web server. It's called a micro web application framework. So it only provides you the minimum amount of things that you need to get a web server up and running. But it's useful for teaching because, yeah, you don't have too much overhead. So nevertheless, it's actually being used by a lot of large websites. So Instagram, I think, uses Flask. And so, yeah, quite some big web companies actually use these web servers. So what can you use it for? You could use it to develop your own static web page. So for example, a blog or a private homepage. You can use it to create a dynamic web page. We'll need that for our game later on. Or you could make an API server. So what are the kind of features that you get with Flask? It's very small, so it's very easy to get started. And it has a development server and a debugger included. So it's very convenient because we can just write the code and then we can just start the server and get running straight away. It's got some unit testing support. I won't show this today, but maybe next time. It's open source, and it doesn't have a lot of the stuff that other frameworks have. So for example, Flask knows nothing about databases. It doesn't know about validating form inputs and stuff like that. So, but you can always kind of use third-party extensions to get that in. Okay, there's some documentation, and if you want to install it and you use the Conda environment or the Anaconda environment, the way you install it is typically by just typing in conda install Flask, and then it installs the software for you, including all the dependencies. And here are just some alternatives in case you want to develop something, maybe something larger. You could look into Django or Ruby on Rails, or Tornado is again quite a small framework. Okay, so let's look at a first little web browser that we can implement. Shown here, it's our Hello World in Flask. It only contains is it 6 lines of code? And so I can run this, and it tells me, okay, the server is now running on HTTP :127.0.0.1:5000. So I can now visit this web page, and it will show me the words hello world. Right, so it's this text that I returned here so I defined the function hello, and returned the text hello world, and that's exactly what was shown when I was visiting this web page. But we look through this code in a second in more detail. Okay, so if you save this Python script here as hello-world.py, the way you can run the server is by typing in Python hello-world.py. And then you get exactly the message that I've shown you. And then if you want to stop it again, you just press Control-C. Right? That cancels the server. So in particular, if you change the code, you have to restart the server again so that it picks up the changes that you've made. OK, let's look through the code commands that we have. So in the first 2 lines, we've imported the Flask package, and we created a new application. Right? And the application here takes this magic underscore name underscore. This is for technical details. But basically, after this, we have our app server instantiated. The next 3 lines here, here we create a new route. And so this route is basically an endpoint that we can visit. It's a URL that we can go to, and the web server will respond and give us the information back. And in this case, my route is just / which is basically the landing page of my web server. So if I just go to the URL, this is the first page that I'm going to get presented. And then, so basically, the first line here, this is a decorator. It's called a decorator. And we're decorating the function hello. And we're basically telling Flask that this function hello should be called whenever we visit the web endpoint /. And these functions, they always return some text. And the text is exactly the HTML document, or it's the text that should be rendered by the web browser. So here I just return hello world, but in principle I could also put in a full HTML web page in. OK, and then the final 2 lines, I just call app.run, which starts the web browser, and then I can start visiting the web page and looking at it. OK, so we have a debug mode in Flask. So if you run the app with the flag debug equals true, you actually get a lot more information about what's going on in the web browser, in particular if you get error messages. So if you have an error somewhere in your code, and you have this debug equals true, it will print out on the web browser, you will see a big stack of information with exactly the parts that has been going wrong. It's basically a traceback in your web browser that you get. Another advantage of using this debug equals true is that you don't have to restart the web browser every single time you change the code. So instead, you can just change the code and reload the web page on the web browser, and the server will reload automatically as well. Another comment is that by default, the web browser that you're running on your local machine is only accessible in your local machine. So no one else in your network will be able to access the web page. If you wanted to, you could set the command host equals 0.0.0.0. If you do that, you open up your web browser to everyone else who is part in your network. So then other people can actually access your web server. And so you should be quite careful with that, right? Because it could be a security flaw. Maybe, in principle, the web server can do everything, right? You can code up a web server that executes commands on your computer. And you have to be careful with that. But in case you want to make your app available, then this is the line that you need. OK, so at the moment, our web browser is a bit basic. We can only kind of show hello world. So let's extend it a little bit. Let's say we wanted to, maybe we're developing some kind of blog, right? And the blog should be for multiple users. So it will be cool to kind of just have a URL that lists all the users that are part in our system. OK, so the way we do that is, first of all, I make a dictionary with all the users that I have in my system. In this case, it's just 2. And I always have a username, and then the first name and surname is a dictionary here. It's a Python dictionary. And then what do I need to do? I define a new function. In this case, the name doesn't really matter. I just call it show user overview. And I decorate this function with this add app.route and then /user. And this now tells Flask, OK, if I visit the web page localhost 170.0.0.1/user, then call this function here, evaluate it, and return the result that the function returns. And so what do I do here? I actually generate a valid, well, a semi-valid HTML part. So you can see I start a header1 tag here and I close a header1 tag here with the content our users. So I will see some kind of header. And then I add another string in here, and that string is generated in the line above, where I basically go through all the users' names and I list them up with break lines in between, right? So this function will now generate a header part, and then this part here with the 2 brackets, this is going to be replaced by the list of by the names of all the users that my blog has. Okay, so then we can run this and we can look at the results again. And so obviously if I just visit the main part, I will just get hello world again. But if I now type in users, user, then you get the result that we want, right? So this is exactly, this was the header part, and these are the 2 users that we want. If I misspell it, as I've just done now, right, then the server will respond and will tell me this page is not found, right? The requested URL was not found on the server. So this is the image that you would get then. Okay, so we can also parameterize the URLs. So maybe I want to allow people to type in /user and then an arbitrary username. So I want to show the profile of a specific user. But I don't want to add a route for every single user that I want to have in my system. Instead, I parameterize that, and I use a route that has these brackets in here, and this bracket is just basically a placeholder for something. And now in my function definition, I call this function show user profile, and now this takes an argument username, and this is exactly the value of username will be the value of the URL that has been typed in here. And so again, I can now return, so that my resulting web page that I return is just user and then the text of the username. So we can try that as well. So let's try app.1. Okay, so now we have all the users, but then if I add slash and, for example, George, then so it has now responded, it has realized, okay, we are talking about the /user/George. The variable username got the value George, and I returned the string user George, which is now visualized here in the web browser. Okay? So this is how you handle URLs with parameterized URLs. Yeah. In other words, with this route, we now match the URL localhost :5000 /user /name for any type of name. Okay, so the next part is templates. So far in our web browser, we just returned kind of very basic text, right? But the text wasn't really valid HTML. Right? We were missing the body part, we were missing the HTML text that should be surrounded by it. So really, what we should have done is we should have written stuff like that, right? So our login route should return kind of a long string with multi-line string with all the information. And if you do that for a few routes, you end up with a kind of a massive code base that mainly consists of text, which is not so, which is not very nice to work with. So instead, Flask comes with templates. So the idea is basically you have a separate folder where you store all the templates of the websites as HTML files. with placeholders, and you just replace text in these text holders, and you return that instead. So I'll show you how this works. So here's another route that we want to implement. It's called post, and post/name. So here we can actually, this function now will handle two routes at the same time. And rather than, and so you can see this is a parameterized route again. So we have this parameter name here. And in case we just visit, we don't have a name here, then the value will just be none. So we have a default parameter here with a default value. But so now, instead of returning kind of a long text, I now render a template, and I give the file name here. It's my file. I have a file called post.html. And this render template also takes in additional arguments. In this case, I have a name argument here. And what's happening now is my template system, or the Flask template system, will open up this file. It will go through the file, and whenever it finds the variable name, it will replace the name with the value of the variable name here. So it's generating my HTML file for me. So this function here, render template, you need to import. So you type in from Flask import render template, and then you can use it. OK, so the last thing that we need to understand is what is this post.html. And so this thing here lives in a folder called templates. So in my directory, I have the web server. I created a directory called templates, and I stored the file post.html. And this is the content of it. And so you can see basically this is standard HTML. So I have my doc.html, HTML. I have a title tag, a closing title tag. But then I also have these magic commands that the template rendering system will evaluate. And so here I have an if statement. So if name exists, so if name was not none, then I will I will return a header with the content displaying blog post. And then here, these double curly brackets here, these are placeholders for a Python variable. And in this case, this placeholder will be replaced by the content of the variable name. And if name does not exist, then I will just return the content header1, no post name given, closed header1. And so now we can run this. And we can, again, visit the web page, and we can go to blog, to post. Nope. What was it? OK, maybe I need to, let's see. OK. I hadn't run that piece before. Here we go. OK, so if I just visit /post, then it tells me I haven't specified the name of the post. So then I can, again, maybe /election, and then will tell me, OK, I'm now displaying the blog post with the name election. Right, so this is my template that was customized. OK, then maybe we'll stop here, and we'll continue at 1:15.